For the next few moments, I'm going to be going into the city of Jerusalem, into what is called the millennial reign of Jesus Christ, which is the 1,000-year reign of Christ. Oddly enough, we're headed in that direction, and yet this has little preaching done. Very few people preach on what life will be like in the millennium. The first thing I would like to do, however, is tell you that in Revelation chapter 20, verses 1 through 4, it tells you about this particular time frame. And I'm going to go ahead and read it. It says this: I saw an angel come down from heaven, having a key to the bottomless pit, and a great chain in his hand, and laid hold on the dragon, the old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. Cast him into the bottomless pit, shut him up, and set a seal on him, that he should not deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years were fulfilled. And after that he must be loosed for a season. And I saw thrones, and they that sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus, and for the word of God, which did not worship the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. And they, these are tribulation survivors, lived and reigned with Christ during the 1,000 years, or during that time of the 1,000 years. Now, this event that I have just read to you happens at the conclusion of a time called the 7-year tribulation. And what I would like to do is take you to the 7th year of the 7th year tribulation and tell you what is happening in heaven. The 7th day is Shabbat. Every 7th year is a Shemitah year. And so in the tribulation, the 7th year would be a Shemitah year in heaven. The 7th is also a time of rest, or in Greek it's called the Sabbatismos, the eternal rest that is prepared for the people of God. We will be for 1 year, and I'm going to show you the verse that I believe identifies this as a fact. We will be 1 year at the marriage supper of the Lamb. This will not be a 24-hour dine and go home and come back to earth. And the reason I say that this marriage supper of the Lamb will last the 7th year of the tribulation, and it will happen in heaven, is because when you read in the Old Testament, in the Torah, in Deuteronomy chapter 24 and verse 5, when a man was married, he took 1 year off to spend time with his companion. And since we're the bride of Christ, we're going to have 1 year of spending time. Come on, all you folks that love to eat are going to have a heyday that time, aren't you? Look, you know, like I do, Pentecostals can out-eat Baptists any day of the week. You can look at us and tell that's the truth. But anyway, we're going to be at the marriage supper of the Lamb. So the marriage supper of the Lamb happens on the 7th year of the tribulation, when it's happening on earth, and it lasts for approximately 1 entire year of celebrating with the Lord. And then there's a whole teaching I could get into for another 20 minutes just on that, but we must move speedily through the message. Now, the last 42 hours of the tribulation period on earth, the Bible will indicate a lot of activity is going to be happening at one time, and I want to share that activity with you. First of all, in the book of Revelation, chapter 16 and verse 12, it says that the kings of the east are crossing the dried up Euphrates River and moving toward the Middle East, or toward Israel, in a battle with the Antichrist. So there is a huge army coming into the Holy Land. Then we find in Daniel chapter 11 and verse 24 that the kings of the east may be coming for either oil, because there's a Hebrew word there that can be translated shimon as oil, or they could be coming for food, because there'll be terrible food shortages, and Israel is one of those places through their drip irrigation system and underground water that can produce food not only for their nation but send it out around the world. So it may be one of the few places left on the earth that has food during the tribulation period, is that particular area. Number 3, in Revelation 13, 1 through 2, the Antichrist and 10 kings will be coming toward the final time of their rule prior to Jesus taking over the planet and the kingdoms of this world literally becoming the kingdoms of our God. In the latter part of the tribulation, a city ruling over the kings of the earth, which is identified in Revelation chapter 17 and 18 as Mystery Babylon, will be destroyed by fire in 1 hour. My belief is it's a nuclear attack, or it's an attack that literally is similar to that, because only a city could be destroyed in an hour by that kind of attack. And the Bible said people are afraid of the smoke that's coming up, and they go afar off. They don't get near. They stand afar off because of fear of the smoke. And so I believe that since the kings destroy it, not a volcanic eruption, but the kings destroy this city, the 10 kings with the Antichrist, I believe it has something to do with nuclear war or something of that nature. We also discover that The big verse, Revelation 16:16, he gathers all nations together in what is called the Valley of Har Megiddo, or the Mount of Megiddo. Now, the Valley of Megiddo is known in the Old Testament as the Valley of Jezreel, or the Jezreel Valley. And if you want to see how big it is 200 miles square. And every major empire, just about, in world history has fought a war in that valley. And so what they call the mother of all battles is going to take place at the very conclusion of the tribulation, and you can see all these nations coming together. You can see the Antichrist and his armies, and this great clash is about to take place. Now, the amazing thing will be this. That clash is going to be interrupted suddenly, by the return of Jesus on a white horse. In the book of Revelation chapter 19, I behold a white horse, and he that sat upon him is faithful and true. In righteousness he does judge and make war. His eyes are like a flaming fire. On his heads are many crowns. He has a name written that no man knows but he himself, but his name is called the Word of God, and the armies in heaven follow him on white horses. But he has a name called King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And so Jesus will return. And in 2 Thessalonians 2, with the brightness of his coming, he will literally destroy the armies that are in that valley. One prophet said this: men's eyes will melt in their socket, and their tongues will melt in their mouth. Jesus' glorious coming will literally melt the physical bodies of soldiers by the tens of thousands that are in that valley. Now, the first place that Jesus goes to with the saints is he goes to the city of Jerusalem, to the Mount of Olives. And the Bible says in Zechariah 14 that his feet that day shall stand upon the Mount of Olives, which is eastward in Jerusalem, and the mountain shall cleave in two parts, one part to the east and one part to the west, creating a great valley. And that is going to happen the moment that his feet touch the Mount of Olives. There's a gentleman in Israel, and because our program goes all over the world, I won't name him, but he's from Israel. He works for a geological department, has a PhD degree from Berkeley, and he's the one that discovered, his department did all the earthquake fault lines, and there is an actual underground fault line that runs across the Mount of Olives. Robert, you know this, that they will not build any apartments or any hotels. The Holiday Inn wanted to build a big hotel. They said, you can't do it. The ground is too unstable. And here's the weird part. The way that fault line runs is exactly the way it runs according to the prophet when Jesus steps there and splits that thing east and west. It is exactly, oh, you better shout right there. You're going to miss a good place to shout right there. So that has been confirmed. Now, the Bible tells you in Isaiah chapter 63, verses 1 through 3, that the Lord's first place that he goes to is the area of Bozrah. Now, Bozrah is in the area of Jordan, and it's the southern part of Jordan, kind of below the Dead Sea on that area. Now, why would he go there first? Because there is a place called Petra, which is located in the mountains of Jordan, and many scholars believe, based on the book of Psalms and several other passages, that there will be a Jewish remnant that will flee to the wilderness in the tribulation. That's in Revelation 12, by the way. And God will prepare them a place for 42 months to be protected. And many people believe it's the fortified city of Petra, which is located in Jordan. So it makes sense that Jesus goes to Bozrah, and the Bible says he goes alone to do battle. Now, in Isaiah 63, it says, there is blood on my garments, and I tread the winepress alone. Then if you come into Revelation, you discover that Jesus Christ has blood on his garments, but we always thought that was his blood. It's not. He has gone alone to save the Jewish remnant at Petra, to destroy any army coming against them. Then he comes back into heaven, and this is where the saints will come back with him, and the armies of heaven will come with him. He fights Bozrah alone, so they come back, and it says in Zechariah chapter 12 and also verse 4 and 7 that he will fight the battle for Judah. Now, Judah is a tribal region, as most of you know, but it includes part of Jerusalem, all of Bethlehem, and the area of Jericho. And there's a lot of Jewish settlements, of course, in this area. That's the area of the Palestinian Authority at this point. But that whole area of Judah or Judea is going to be very controversial in the tribulation period, because there's a battle of land for peace going on right now between the Jewish people and the Palestinian people. But the Lord will come to that area, and he will save the tents descendants of Judah. He will save his remnant that is hiding in the area of the mountains of Judah. Then we find in Daniel chapter 11 verse 45 that the Antichrist will have set up his headquarters between the two seas in the glorious holy mountain, and that's Jerusalem, and the two seas are the Dead Sea and the Mediterranean Sea, because Jerusalem sits between the Dead Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. So the Antichrist will have had his headquarters in Jerusalem for 42 months. So then after Jesus comes to save the remnant at Bozrah, which I believe is the area of Petra, then he comes back and fights the area of Judah to save his people. Then the third place he's going to go through is he's going to go to Jerusalem, and that's when he comes to the Mount of Olives, and that's when all the saints of God will be with him. So Zechariah 14 verses 1 through 7, if you'll read that in its entirety, deal with the Messiah's return to the city of Jerusalem. And it will be the Mount of Olives. If you don't know where it sits, the Mount of Olives actually sits directly in front of the eastern gate, that big gate in Jerusalem that's closed. There's a valley called the Kidron Valley, and right there is the Mount of Olives. So Jesus will be coming to the east side of the Mount of Olives, which will be directly in front of that gate. And I tell you, if it doesn't happen before then when that earthquake happens, it's going to collapse that gate. The Bible says in Ezekiel, the gate facing east will be shut. It is for the prince, and the prince will open that gate, and Jesus will walk through that gate. Now it's interesting, because if you go to Jerusalem, right in front of that eastern gate is covered with a cemetery. The Jewish people, a lot of them are buried on the base or this midway up the Mount of Olives. Now in front of that eastern gate, it's a Muslim cemetery. And I noticed something one time. I noticed the way the headstones face, that if a Muslim were to stand up, let's just say that someone who's dead as a Muslim could stand up, then they would face the Mount of Olives. And I realized that the way the Jews are buried, that the way that they come, they would face this way. So I said to myself one day, why do the Muslims have their headstone that, like if they were raised from the dead, they'd go this way, and why do the Jews on the Mount of Olives have their headstones where they'd go that way? And a guy told me, he said, well, let's look at the beliefs of the religious Jews. They believe one day the Messiah is going to come. They believe he's going to come to the Mount of Olives. They're devout Jews. So they're going to raise and follow him into the city. Y'all didn't get that. Raise and follow the Messiah into the city. And I said, what about the Muslims? They said, well, the Muslims believe there'll be a resurrection too. They believe Jerusalem is a part of that. So they come up this way and meet whoever it is they're supposed to meet coming into the city. So here's the thing about those cemeteries. The reason that, and this is what I've heard, that Muslims years ago built that cemetery in front of the eastern gate was they knew that the Jewish Messiah was coming, and the Jews expected the Messiah to come through that gate. And they said, since Jews believe in all this kosher stuff, they're not going to touch a dead carcass. So if we have graves in front of the eastern gate, the Jewish Messiah will never go through the gate. They didn't depend on or know that the Mount of Olives was going to split. Because the splitting, are y'all listening? Because the splitting of the Mount of Olives will be the thing that would open the way for the Messiah to come into that gate. Somebody better praise God right now if you believe what I'm saying. Now, in that area, even though there's an earthquake, in that whole area surrounding the east side of Jerusalem toward the west side and over to the north, there's this huge valley, and it's called the Kidron Valley, but it's also called in the Old Testament the Valley of Jehoshaphat. Now, there is, according to Scripture, a judgment which takes place. This is in Joel chapter 3, verse 2, and also verse 12, that he will judge the nations in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. Now, this judgment is mentioned in Matthew chapter 25 and verse 32 through verse 33, where the Lord will judge the nations, and he does two kinds of separation. Now this is in your parables. It says he judges the nations and he separates sheep from the goat. He judges the nation and he separates the wheat from the tare. Now we try to make that a rapture verse. That's not a rapture verse. That's a verse when Jesus comes back to the planet and judges the nations in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. Now who are the sheep? The sheep would be the people who have survived the tribulation somehow. And I will tell you, I wouldn't risk missing the coming of the Lord to see if you could survive. Just saying that. But there will be people that will have miraculously survived who are the sheep who did not take the mark of the beast or his name or his number. There will then be those who took the mark of the beast. They took his name and his number. And you can read about this in the book of Revelation. Those who did not take the mark or the name of the number and did not worship the beast, especially those that beheaded, they are going to be resurrected according to Daniel 12 and 1. And they are going to be able to be resurrected and rule and reign with Christ for the 1,000 years the way the saints of God, we have a resurrected body by then. then, that we're going to rule and reign with Christ for 1,000 years. But let's say that you have two people there. The goat are those that have the mark, and the sheep are those that don't. The wheat are those who do not have the mark, and the tare would be those who do. So there's a separation of the wheat and the tare, and the angels do what? Gather the tare and cast them into fire. See, and the sheep and the goat, there's a separation there. So when you see the parables of Jesus with this separation that takes place, there is a separation of wheat and tares in the church now. Come on, somebody. You know that. There's a separation going on between the sheep and the goat, the real saints and those that aren't. But the real judgment happens when Jesus Christ comes back and does that separation, all right? And so in Joel chapter 3:12, and I think it's also verse 13, it tells you that there will be a massive judgment in the valley of Jehoshaphat. As a matter of fact, let me just look on my notes here and let me see. Joel chapter 3:12 through 13, I think I need to read this. It says this: "Let the heathen be wakened and come to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there I will sit and judge all the heathen round about. Put you in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come get down, for the press is full. The fats overflow, for the wickedness is great." So that's the judgment. Now, I want to share with you a couple things. Jesus Christ, at the moment that he comes to the city of Jerusalem, initiates a program of several things. Number one is a judgment to separate the people with the mark that don't have the mark. The first thing he does, which is interesting, is he takes the beast and the false prophet, the Antichrist and the false prophet and the beast system, all those people involved, and the Bible says he casts them alive into the lake of fire. So there is a separation immediately of the Antichrist and the false prophet and those connected to him. Now someone says, now how can they be cast alive into fire if that is hell? Because hell has fire. Same way that in the Old Testament, a man by the name of Korah rebelled against Moses, and the earth opened up and swallowed them alive. It's not impossible for God to do the same thing. Now, one of the greatest verses in the Bible, in my opinion, is when the angel comes down with the key to the bottomless pit, sets a seal on Satan for 1,000 years, and binds him. I love this because it didn't say God sent Michael the archangel to bind the devil. It just says an angel. You know, there's probably an angel up there that he's just real meek and humble and mild, and he worships the Lord, you know, got little wings instead of big wings. Come on, I'm going to preach this the way I feel like preaching it. And you know, instead of Michael saying, "Let me at him, I've been wanting to do this from the very beginning of time," and Gabriel saying, "I'm not a warring prince, but I'd sure like to participate," and God says, "Hey, you, yes, that's right, you." "Me, Lord?" "Yes, you. Go get that chain over there and go bind the devil." "Well, I don't know that I can do that." Wait a minute. He's now whipped. He's now defeated. He's lost his power. He's lost his authority. The kingdoms of the world have become my kingdoms. You got the power to do it. Go bind him up. And he's bound in what's called the abyss, or the Greek word is the abusos. It's translated in the King James translation as the bottomless pit. It is a chamber underneath the earth. And I don't have time to get into all the mohovistic discontinuity, the gap between the crust and the mantle of the earth, and all that, and the possibilities of that being the bottomless pit. Now, the great part about this is where the kingdom of God literally begins to physically rule on earth with Jesus the King. Christ is going to become the king over all the earth. But let me talk to you about this. Jesus Christ is going to become king over all the earth. Now, what I'd like to do is just simply give you the scriptures. Jeremiah 25, 5 through 6, Jeremiah 33 and verse 15, Psalms chapter 2, verses 6 through 8, Isaiah chapter 9, verses 6 and 7, Zechariah chapter 1, verses 4 through 9. Jesus Christ is going to be king. And it'll say in your Bible, the Lord will be king over the earth. And that is Jesus Christ, who is Lord. Christ is coming back as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. He came the first time as the suffering lamb, but they're not going to beat him this second time. They're not going to whip him the second time. They're not going to put a crown of thorns on him the second time. The second time, he's coming back with a stack of crowns on his head to rule and reign for 1,000 years. He's called King of Kings and Lord of Lords, Revelation chapter 19, 16. So Revelation 2, verse 5, Revelation 19, 15, and then Zechariah 14, 16, the Lord is going to be king over the earth. Now, it's real interesting that in the Psalms, in Psalms chapter 72, 1 through 9, it actually gives you all the nations and the activity of what's going to be happen when the Lord becomes king over all the earth. So I'm not going to read the passage, but I'm going to take the the lines out of it and tell you what it says. The kings of Tarshish shall render him tribute. The kings of Sheba and Dedan, and by the way, that's the Arabian Peninsula, predominantly Muslim, shall offer him gifts. The kings shall fall before him, and nations shall worship him. He will deliver the needy and the poor who cry out to him. Now, this is a psalm telling you what's going to happen when the Lord is ruling over the earth. The souls of the poor and the needy he will save. Then it says, men shall pray before him continually. Men shall bless him all day. There shall be an abundance of grain and fruit. His name shall continue as long as the Son of Men, as the sun exists, and men shall bless him. Now, it gets interesting here with another aspect of Old Testament prophecy that talks about King David. King David is going to be heavily involved in the millennial reign of the Messiah. Do you know why? Because the Messiah is the son of David. And the covenant that God gave David was for the city of Jerusalem. God gave Abraham the covenant for the land, but the covenant of the city of Jerusalem and a person sitting on the throne of Jerusalem was given to David and David alone. So here are some verses. In Jeremiah 30 in verse 9, King David will be the prince of Israel and will also rule from the city of Jerusalem during the reign of the Messiah. Then in Ezekiel 34 verses 23 through 24, David is going to be king over the people of Israel. That's also in Ezekiel chapter 37, 21 through 25. In Zechariah 14, 16 through 19, every nation is going to have to go up to the Feast of Tabernacles and have the Feast of Tabernacles celebrated in Jerusalem. That's going to be a lot of people. If you refuse, and your country refuses to go to the Feast of Tabernacles and celebrate, Scripture says that there will be no rain, that the Lord will withhold the rain to where you will not have a harvest of crops in your nation. So how many of you know, here we are still dealing with earthly people. Now think about what I'm about to say. Satan is bound. If Satan is bound, demons are bound. I could talk about that if you want me to. Demons are bound. The spirit of Leviathan is bound. So Satan is bound and demons are bound. All right, so you think everybody just be getting along. Praise God. Hallelujah. Hey, Jesus is Lord. Glory to God. Feast of Tabernacles is coming. But what they still deal with is not demons or devils. They still deal with a carnal nature. And God still has to motivate them with different things, like it ain't gonna rain in your property unless you come up and let's have church together at the Feast of Tabernacles. Not church, but celebration together. Titled this A Prophetic Alert, Trouble in the 70th Year. And I'm going to read a verse from the book of Daniel, and I'm going to build around this verse, although this is a verse that happened in history. History does repeat itself according to Ecclesiastes 1, 9, and 10. I've taught you that for many, many years. Daniel 9:25, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. And here's the main verse. And the streets shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times. That last phrase, the wall will be built in troublous times, is a prophecy connected to what we're going to talk about that has happened recently in America. And this is a very deep prophetic word. I'm going to have you to follow me very carefully, because what I'm going to show you is how history is repeating itself. And that this passage that deals with Cyrus giving the Jews a decree to go back to Jerusalem after 70 years, they were going to take and build a wall, but it was going to be a lot of trouble involved once the decree was made. Now, we have to talk a little bit about the nation of Israel here, because this is where the foundation of this verse actually comes in at, with Daniel and the Babylonian captivity. and the Jews returning from their Babylonian captivity to build the walls of Jerusalem. This is what it's speaking about, and restore the gates. If you will look throughout modern history, since especially 1948, you will discover that the United States has been directly involved in one form or another. Our leaders have, our presidents have, with Israel as a nation. But I want to share with you a little bit of some things that you might not be aware of. Harry Truman was the president that announced and gave the order for the UN to agree to reestablish the nation of Israel in 1948. If the United States had not done that, there would have been great difficulty with the process. The UN carved out a territory for the Jewish people in the area of Palestine. But I want to tell you that I have Harry Truman's biography, which was written by historians in its 2 volumes. When Harry Truman began to announce the reestablishment of Israel, he hit his desk with his fist and screamed, "I am Cyrus." Cyrus, the king that gave the decree for the Jews to return from Babylon back to Jerusalem. He was saying he was a picture of that king. Then we have in the 1973's Richard Nixon that received a call at 3 o'clock in the morning from Golda Meir, who was at that time the Prime Minister of Israel, saying there's a war breaking out. We need help and we need assistance. Richard Nixon later said that he heard his Quaker mothers, they were Quakers, voice in his ear when he heard that woman talk. And he assisted taking weapons and shipping them into Israel, which helped Israel win the 1973 Yom Kippur War. And it was a very terrible war, but Nixon is known as the person that helped make that happen, along with Henry Kissinger. 1987, Reagan was president of the United States. And the Soviet Jews began to be released from Russia with the help of Mikhail Gorbachev, the Pope, and Ronald Reagan. I call it the Pope, the Eagle, and the Iron Sickle. And these 3 men got together, and the Russian Jews began to be released. And it was 70 years they had been in Russia. 70 years the Jews had not been able to leave the Soviet Union. 1917 to 1987, 70 years. Then in 2018, President Donald Trump did something that every other president promised to do since 1967, but never did because they were politically afraid to do it. In 2018, in the month of May, President Trump announced that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, and the U.S. Embassy would be moved from Tel Aviv to the city of Jerusalem, which officially recognized the city of Jerusalem as the eternal capital of Israel. The point that I make, and you're already aware of this, that it happened on Israel's 70th anniversary. Because you say, how do you add that up? Well, 1948 to 2018 is 70 years. And this 70 years was noted by the rabbis in Israel. It was noted by preachers in America who preach prophecy as very significant. And I'm going to get into that in the next few moments. Immediately, even in Jerusalem newspapers, there was a picture of Trump being compared to a king by the name of Cyrus, the very king of Daniel 9:25 that gave the decree for the Jews to go back to Jerusalem, rebuild the city of Jerusalem, and return to Israel, and even take the treasures of their temple with them. Who was Cyrus? He was a Gentile king. The Medes and the Persians had overthrown the Babylonian Empire. And Cyrus came in and gave a decree for the Jews, ending their 70 years of captivity. Jeremiah had said in Jeremiah 25:11 that they would be in captivity in Babylon for 70 years. But that decree is what released them to leave Babylon and go back to their homeland. I'm just laying a foundation right now so that everybody will know where we're going. Listen carefully. Had the old leaders stayed in power at the end of that 70 years, Nebuchadnezzar had died, but Belshazzar would have never released the Jews to go back to their homeland. There had to be a change in administrations for Cyrus to come in and take over Babylon, and for Cyrus to have the favor of God, because you may not know this, but it was predicted in the Old Testament that Isaiah said, Cyrus my shepherd, and even predicted a story about the gates, and he went under the gates of Babylon at the night that the party was taking place, and the king was having a drunken party, and the handwriting on the wall occurred. This night your kingdom would be taken from you, the prophet said. And ladies and gentlemen, Cyrus's name was penned in the Bible 150 years before it ever happened. And Jewish history says that Daniel showed him the prophecies that were in the Bible where God had named him. And immediately he gave favor to the Jews and favor to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and said, you can go back to your land, you can rebuild your city, and I'll even take the treasures that's in the temple of Marduk, and I'll let you take those temple treasures back. And they carried back what the enemy had tried to take. And somebody needs to thank God for his word. Woo. Cyrus's decree is important because it's parallel to what we've seen recently. Number one, Cyrus's decree was that Jerusalem belonged to the Jewish people. Cyrus's decree number two was that they could return to their land and they could rebuild their city. Decree number three was that they could return with their wealth or their treasures and use them in a temple that they were getting ready to build. However, here is what is in the Bible, and here is what the Holy Spirit told me to tell you, because we're going to follow what I'm about to say very deeply in the next few moments, are very deep. It says in the Bible, the decree will come forth and the street will be rebuilt, meaning the city will be rebuilt, the nation will be rebuilt, and there will be a wall built in troublous times. And we understand it's talking about Jerusalem's wall there, but everything has a parallel. That which has been is that which shall be. Ladies and gentlemen, the decree would occur, but there would be serious trouble as a result of that decree being made. It was resisted. This decree was resisted by a group of people in the government back in the time of the Jews, because Samaria was then the headquarters. Now, let me stop and move ahead in history. In May of 2018, when President Trump announced Jerusalem as the capital, announced the embassy would be moved there, it was during the 70th anniversary of Israel as a nation. Oddly enough, immediately, people began to say that he was a modern day Cyrus. In fact, when he began to talk about this, coins were minted in Israel. Now, this is not official currency that you spend with, but these are mementos and coins that are made. Cyrus, Belfar, Trump, Declaration, 1917 to 2017, and you see it there in Hebrew, and this is called a temple coin. People have noticed if you put a beard on President Trump, he even looks like Cyrus. Now, these coins, again, are not currency, but they are very popular. They're being purchased and taken to people around the world. And the rabbinical, the head rabbis in Israel, the ones that I read after, really, truly believe that our president is almost, we don't believe this, of course, a reincarnation of the Cyrus that existed a long time ago in the time of the Babylonian captivity. But however, pay attention. When the Jews came back from Babylonian captivity at the end of 70 years, and they got to their city, they had, pardon my expression, all hell break loose. They had resistance. They had people trying to stop the building of the wall. They had people that tried to do their best to hinder their work. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go somewhere. That was my introduction to the message right there. Now we're about to go into the message that I feel the Holy Spirit wants me to give you. Why is it that since May, when this decree was made by the president, why has all hell broke loose on the administration? Why is it that the majority of media has turned completely against him, has nothing good to say? Something has a parallel in history that we need to look at that is being repeated. Let me give you the verse again. The latter part of Daniel 9:25, the streets shall be built again. That means the rebuilding of the city, or as someone noted has said, make America great again by bringing jobs and infrastructure back. There's a parallel. Then it says, and the wall would be built, but there's going to be a lot of troublous times involved in the rebuilding process. Now, in the Hebrew scriptures, the word troublous in the Daniel 9 verse means distress, stressful, a series of troubles that begin at the same time. Not trouble, troublous. So because it's a plural word, it means here comes a problem. Bam, there comes a problem. Bam, there comes a problem. Does it not sound like what they've been dealing with in the swamp? One thing after the other, after the other. And Nehemiah, we're going to talk about Nehemiah, we're going to talk about Ezra, we're going to talk about Daniel a little bit. We're going to combine this together. But when they went to take that wall and rebuild the street, the Samaritans had 3 men in their government, because Samaria had become the government when Jerusalem was destroyed. They had money coming in. They had trade coming in. The Jews had been away for 70 years. So they saw it as an economic threat for the Jews to come in and do that wall. To build the wall, it means that they would reestablish an economic system in a place where the politicians in the swamp didn't want that economic system to be developed. Y'all going to read through this in a little bit and figure it all out, I promise you. There was a man by the name of Nehemiah. Everybody say Nehemiah. And you can read the story in the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah comes along and begins to rebuild a wall that causes great trouble for Israel, because only when he talked about the wall did the Samaritans go crazy. Only when he started working on the wall did the politicians of Samaria begin to manifest and begin to do their best to make sure that the wall would never be built. Nehemiah, however, was the new governor of Judea. He had been appointed by the kings of Persia to go into Judea to be the governor. Let's say it this way. Nehemiah was not a priest. He was not a prophet. He was a reformer. And they hated the reforms that Nehemiah, I'm about to preach here in a minute, was presenting to the city of Jerusalem and Judea. Nehemiah also, if you'll read his story, check this one out, had enemies on the inside of his administration working against him. Nehemiah, I'll show you in a moment, had to end up firing people inside the administration in Jerusalem, including a bunch of priests. Does this sound familiar to anything that's happened recently? Now, I'm about to lay the big one on you right here. I want to just lay it on you right now and get this out of the way. You ready? There are only several places in the Bible where Satan is mentioned in the Old Testament. As a matter of fact, if you come to the New Testament, Paul said, Satan has hindered us. I have a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan. Satan tempts Jesus. Why, though, in the Old Testament do you have Isaiah 14, Ezekiel chapter 28 that alludes to him, Job chapter 1 and Job chapter 2, and a very small verse that mentions him one time in the book of Zechariah? But guess what I'm going to tell you? If you will look, when this decree was made, Satan didn't have a lot going on until the decree was made about Jerusalem. And ladies and gentlemen, Satan starts showing up after the decree, at the end of 70 years, more in one time frame than you read at any other time frame in the Old Testament. Want to prove it to you? You want to go there with me? First of all, I'll give you 3 quick examples here. First of all, in 538 BC, Daniel is in Babylon. The Medes and Persians have taken over, and a prince of the kingdom of Persia, which is a principality demon, shows up in the atmosphere in Daniel chapter 10 and hinders the prayer answer, not the prayer from going up, but the answer that Daniel is seeking prophetically for 21 days. You don't find that any other place in the Bible. A demon prince over Babylon. Why is Satan so upset that he wanted to make sure, get me the biggest prince I can find over that nation that's ruled that part of the world, and set him right over top of Daniel's head, and you make sure Daniel doesn't get an answer, you make sure he never understands the vision, you make sure that none of this makes sense to him. So Satan sends a deep, dark prince in the atmosphere, Ephesians 6 and 12, principality, to block the prayer of the man of God. Check this out. Woo! And then we find in 537 to 538 BC, same time frame, this is in Zechariah 3, 1 through 4, the Jews have gone back to Jerusalem. They are trying to rebuild the temple. They are in the process of cleansing the altar, and it says this: he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the presence of the Lord, and Satan standing among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, the angel actually said it, the Lord rebuke you, Satan. Even the Lord that has chosen Jerusalem rebuke you. Is this not a brand plucked out of a fire? Satan himself shows up on the Temple Mount in the city of Jerusalem at the end of the 70 years when a decree has been made that the Jews are going to Is anybody understanding what I'm about to tell you? No big problem when you're in captivity. No big problem when the Jews for 70 years are living in Babylon. But when a leader named Cyrus makes a decree in the spirit realm and fulfills a prophecy, then Satan hates the fulfillment of prophecy. He hates it when a word has been spoken and a man or maybe a woman comes along, and sometimes with or without their knowledge, they do something that enacts a prophetic word. Satan is angry at them because now they're coming back to Jerusalem. Now the stories and the prophecies over Jerusalem can continue. Now the prophecies about the Messiah can continue. Now the prophecies about coming out of Bethlehem will be a king can now be fulfilled. The devil had him out of their property, and he didn't care. But when the decree came to bring him back, the enemy knew, I'm now in trouble, because now what the prophets have said can begin to come to pass. Hey. Now, the third example is Esther. Now, Esther is 60 years later after this, according to some scholars, but she's in Persia. Now, the Medes and Persians are still ruling, remember that. And there's 127 provinces where there are Jews. And what happens there, and although Satan is not mentioned by name, you can see his fingerprints all over it. He brings Haman, a government leader. Somebody say government, there's the government again. A government leader who is corrupt and evil, who hates the Jews because he's an Agagite. And if you want to know anything about the Agagites, help me preach here, somebody. King Saul was supposed to kill King Agag and did not, kept him alive, and Samuel came along and killed that king, and somehow a baby got born in that group, and that descendancy of King Agag continued all the way up to the time of Esther. And Haman was a descendant of a king that a king that a Jewish leader slew. He had a vendetta against the Jews, and he built 10 gallows, are you listening, to kill the Jews, and have Mordecai, who was part of the court there, to have him murdered and slay the Jews. Satan's fingerprint is still showing up, trying to annihilate the seed of Abraham, the natural seed of Abraham. So watch this. Let me retrace it with you. No problem till the decree comes. Everything's cool till the decree comes. But when the decree comes, trouble starts. Troublous times. And part of that trouble, you better hear me, is instigated by Satan himself. We are about to get deep. So you better hang on. We are about to get deep. Give the Lord a praise. Now, let me say it to you this way. They have asked me, people have asked me, because, you know, you preach prophetic things, and I really do try to stay away from politics, but I do preach prophecy with nations and leaders. I have to. I have no choice. That's my calling. Someone said, what gave our president the boldness to stand in front of the Palestinian world, the Arab world that does not even believe Israel, some of them at least has a right to exist, that does not believe that the capital needs to be the Palestinian state, and yet he looks in the camera, he stands on a stage and makes a decree. How can he do it? Here's the answer. Every politician and president before him was owned by people or companies. All right, let me go back to this because I don't want to get sidetracked too far. Satan shows up at the end of the 70 years when the decree comes, and President Trump hit, and I'm going to say it publicly, Satan himself when he made that decree about Jerusalem. I'm telling you. Satan didn't send the prince of Arabia or the prince of Persia or the prince of Iran. Satan himself said, I got to stop this man. I got to stop him before he does more damage. And let me explain to you from the eyes of Satan, an actual fallen being, why this decree is so dangerous to him. Because when you start seeing attention go to Jerusalem, to Israel, to expand it, to prosper it, this is what Psalm said. When the Lord shall build up Zion, then he will appear in his glory. The coming of the Lord is linked to the prosperity of Jerusalem and Israel. And Satan knows if I keep letting a man like this understand the Bible. Come on, we've had previous presidents that not only didn't understand the Bible, they didn't believe nothing that was written in the Bible. But we've got an individual that has surrounded himself with preachers and ministers who know what the Word of God says, and the devil knows he's running out of time. Hey, hey! Yes, he does.